Picture this, a bright, sunny Saturday morning in a place called Pinewood Estates. It's one of those quiet little neighborhoods where the houses all look neat and the grass is always cut just right. Birds chirp, kids ride their bikes sometimes, and nothing big or exciting ever seems to happen. At least that's what everyone thought, but oh boy were they wrong. Something wild was brewing under all that calm, and it was about to shake things up in a way no one saw coming. Now let me introduce you to Jake Riley. Jake's 21 years old, a young guy with messy brown hair, a big, goofy grin, and a motorcycle that's so loud it makes your ears buzz. He's the kind of person who loves the wind in his face and the rumble of an engine under him. Every day he'd roll that shiny black bike out of his garage, kick it to life with a loud vroom, and zoom down the street. The sound was like thunder, deep and booming, and it echoed off every house in Pinewood Estates. To Jake, that noise was pure joy. It made him feel free, like he could go anywhere and do anything. But not everyone liked that sound. Nope, not at all. See, the people in Pinewood Estates were used to quiet. They liked their sleepy streets and their peaceful mornings. To them, Jake was trouble. They'd peek out their windows when he rode by, frowning and shaking their heads. "There goes that noisy kid again," they'd mutter. "Why can't he just be quiet like the rest of us?" Some even called him a troublemaker right to his face. "You're too loud, Jake," they'd say. "This is a nice neighborhood, not a racetrack." But Jake, he'd just smile that big grin of his, tip his head, and keep on riding. He didn't care what they thought, or so it seemed. Here's the thing though, Jake wasn't just some loud kid with a bike. Oh no, he had a secret, a big one, the kind of secret that makes your jaw drop when you find out. Nobody in Pinewood Estates had a clue, not the old guy watering his flowers, not the lady walking her tiny dog, not even the kids playing tag in the cul-de-sac. Jake's secret was like a treasure chest buried under a plain old tree. It looked ordinary on top, but dig a little deeper, and whoa, there's something amazing hiding there. What was it? Well, I'll give you a tiny hint. It had to do with more than just his motorcycle. But don't worry, we'll get to that soon. You're gonna love it, I promise. Now let's talk about the other star of this story, Karen Miller. Karen lived right across the street from Jake in a house with perfect white paint and flowers so pretty they looked fake. She was the boss of the HOA, that's the Homeowners Association, a group that makes rules to keep the neighborhood nice. Karen loved rules more than anything. She loved them the way some kids love candy or video games. To her, rules were what made Pinewood Estates special, and if you broke one, watch out. She'd be on you faster than a cat chasing a laser pointer. Karen was the kind of lady you've probably seen before. She had short hair that never moved, even in the wind, and she always wore bright, loud clothes, like a yellow shirt or a pink sweater that screamed, "Look at me." She'd stand on her porch with her arms crossed, staring at the world like she owned it. And her favorite thing to do, peek through her curtains. Yup, she was a curtain peeker. If a leaf fell in the wrong spot or a car parked an inch too close to her driveway, Karen saw it. She'd scribble it down in her little notebook and start planning how to fix it. To her, everything had to be perfect. Everything had to follow the rules. And then there was Jake's motorcycle. Oh man, that bike was Karen's worst enemy. She hated it with all her heart. Every time Jake started it up, vroom vroom, Karen's face would turn red. She'd march to her window, yank the curtain aside, and glare at him like he'd just kicked her favorite flower pot. "That noise," she'd grumble. "It's ruining everything." To her, that loud engine wasn't just annoying, it was against the rules. Now she'd flip through her HOA book, pointing at pages that said stuff like no loud noises after 8 p.m. or keep the peace. She was sure Jake was breaking every single one. Day after day, it was the same thing. Jake would ride his bike, grinning like always, and Karen would watch him, muttering under her breath. Too loud, she'd say, too wild, doesn't belong here. She'd tap her foot and squint her eyes, dreaming of a day when that motorcycle would disappear. Sometimes she'd even yell across the street, "Turn that thing off, Jake Riley, this is a quiet neighborhood." Jake would just wave, nice as could be, and keep going. It drove her nuts. Absolutely bonkers. She couldn't stand that he didn't seem to care. But here, where it gets interesting. Karen thought she had everything under control. She thought she was the queen of Pinewood Estates, the one who kept it all perfect. Her house was spotless, her yard was flawless, and she made sure everyone followed her rules. She figured Jake was just some silly kid she could scare into behaving. Maybe she'd complain enough and he'd stop riding that noisy bike. Maybe he'd move away and her perfect little world would stay perfect forever. That's what she thought anyway. Oh, how wrong she was. Karen had no idea, no clue at all, that her neat little life was about to turn upside down. She didn't know Jake's secret. She didn't know that all her glaring and grumbling was about to come back to bite her in the biggest, wildest way. See, while Karen was busy watching Jake, Jake was watching her. Not in a creepy way, but in a smart way. He noticed things, little things, weird things. And those things were adding up, like pieces of a puzzle he was quietly putting together. For example, Jake saw how Karen's trash cans were always full, way fuller than anyone else. He'd ride by slow sometimes and peek at the stuff sticking out. Paint cans, old rags, even a broken shovel once. Why would someone like Karen, who loved everything perfect, have so much junk? It didn't make sense. And then there were the delivery trucks, big ones showing up at her house at funny times, like super early in the morning or late at night when everyone else was asleep. What was she getting? Why so secret? Jake didn't say anything, but he kept his eyes open. He was curious, and that curiosity was about to lead somewhere huge. So here's the setup. A sunny, sleepy neighborhood. A kid with a loud bike everyone called trouble. A nosy lady who thought she ruled the world. Two people living across the street, one smiling and one glaring, with no idea how their lives were about to crash into each other. Jake's secret was ticking like a clock, ready to go off. Karen's perfect life was a house of cards, waiting to fall. And that motorcycle, it was more than just noise, it was the key to everything. Before we keep going, I've got a question for you, awesome viewer. What would you do if your neighbor hated your favorite thing? Maybe you love playing music or skateboarding or drawing chalk art on the sidewalk and they just can't stand it. Would you stop? Would you fight back? Drop your answer in the comments. I'd love to hear. And stick around, because this story, about to get so good, trust me, you won't believe what happens next. Karen wasn't just a little mad about Jake's motorcycle, she was obsessed. Like totally over the top crazy about it. Every single time Jake turned on his bike, that loud vroom vroom filling the air, Karen lost it. She didn't just sit there and grumble. Nope, she'd burst out of her house like a tornado, her face all red and her eyes squinting hard. In her hand, she'd hold her HOA rule book, that big boring book full of neighborhood rules, like it was some kind of superhero shield. She'd wave it around, pointing at Jake like he'd done something awful. That noise is against the rules. she'd yell. Her voice was so sharp it could slice through anything, even the rumble of Jake's engine. "It's too loud, you're breaking every rule in here." She'd flip the pages fast, showing him lines about no loud sounds and keep the peace. Then she'd get even madder. "I'm calling the cops if you don't stop right now," she'd shout, shaking her fist. She meant it, too. Karen wasn't the type to joke around. She wanted that motorcycle gone, and she'd do anything to make it happen. Jake, though, he didn't even blink. He'd just look at her, shrug his shoulders like it was no big deal, and give his bike a little extra vroom. The engine would roar even louder, rumbling through the street, and off he'd go, riding away with that big grin on his face. It was like he didn't care one bit what Karen thought, or maybe that's what he wanted her to think. See, Jake was good at playing it cool. He didn't argue or yell back. He just kept doing his thing, letting Karen huff and puff all she wanted. But deep down, something was starting to bubble up. Things were getting interesting. Karen's threats weren't just hot air. She wasn't the kind of person to say stuff and not follow through. Oh no, she meant business. One day, Jake came home from a ride and found something on his doorstep, a note. He picked it up, and there in big, angry handwriting it said, "You're ruining this neighborhood." The words were scratched onto the paper so hard it almost ripped. Jake read it, chuckled a little, and tossed it in the trash. "Okay, Karen," he mumbled to himself, shaking his head. But then, the next day, another note showed up. This one was worse. "I'll make you regret that bike," it warned. The letters were all wobbly, like she'd written it super fast while she was mad. Jake laughed again. "She's really worked up, huh?" he said out loud, even though no one was around. He crumpled the note and threw it away, same as the first one. To him, it was kind of funny. Karen was so serious about her rules, and here she was, leaving these grumpy little messages like some kind of angry detective. But even though he acted like it was no big deal, Jake started to notice something. Karen wasn't just yelling and writing notes. Something else was going on, something weird. And once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. It started with her trash bins. You know, those big cans everyone puts out by the street. Jake rode by her house every day, and he couldn't help but peek sometimes. Karen's bins were always stuffed, like way more full than anyone else in Pinewood Estates. Most people just had bags of old food or some grass clippings. But Karen, hers were overflowing with strange stuff. One day Jake saw empty spray paint cans poking out, red ones, blue ones, even a shiny silver one. Another time there were piles of dirty old rags, all crumpled up and stinky. And once, get this, he even spotted a broken shovel, the handle snapped right in half, sticking out of the pile. What's she doing with all that? Jake wondered. It didn't add up. Karen was the HOA queen, right? Her house was perfect, her flowers were perfect, everything about her screamed, "I love things neat." So why was her trash so messy and weird? Was she painting something, fixing something, breaking something? Jake didn't know, but it stuck in his head like a song you can't stop humming. He didn't say anything to her, though, not yet. He just kept riding his bike, watching her from the corner of his eye, letting that little spark of curiosity grow bigger and bigger. See, Karen thought she had Jake all figured out. To her, he was just a noisy kid with a loud toy. She figured if she yelled enough or scared him with her notes, he'd give up and stop. Maybe he'd sell that motorcycle and leave her alone. That's what she hoped anyway. But Jake wasn't scared, not even a little. Those notes, they didn't make him mad or nervous. They made him curious. Every time she shouted or left a message, it was like she was handing him another clue. A clue about what? He wasn't sure yet, but he was starting to think Karen was up to something bigger than just hatting his bike. And here's the cool part. While Karen was busy glaring at Jake, he was watching her right back. Not in a loud way like she did, in a quiet way, a smart way. He'd ride by slow sometimes, pretending he was just enjoying the sun, but really he was looking. Listening, thinking, that broken shovel, was it from her yard? Those paint cans, were they for her house, or something else? Every weird thing he saw made him wonder more. It was like a game, and Jake was good at games. He didn't tell anyone what he was thinking, though. He kept it all inside, letting it build up, waiting for the right moment. So picture this: Karen stomping around with her rulebook, thinking she's in charge. Jake riding his bike, acting like he doesn't care. Notes piling up, trash bins spilling secrets. Two people on opposite sides of the street, locked in a quiet little war. Karen thought she was winning. She thought she'd get rid of that noisy bike and keep her perfect world safe. But Jake, he was starting to see cracks in that perfect world. Cracks she didn't even know were there. And those cracks were about to get a whole lot bigger. Things were heating up in Pinewood Estates, and not just because of the sunny weather. Something was coming, something wild. Karen's obsession was pushing her further, and Jake's curiosity was pulling him closer. What was she hiding? Why all the junk? And what would happen when Jake figured it out? Stick around, you're gonna find out soon. Weeks passed in Pinewood Estates, and things started getting wilder. Karen wasn't just mad anymore, she was bolder. She didn't just yell or leave notes now. She was up to something bigger, and Jake was starting to see it. One night, something really strange happened. It was dark outside, the moon was up, and Jake was inside his house looking out his window. That's when he saw her, Karen. She was sneaking around his garage, moving quiet like a cat. She got real close to his motorcycle, bending down low, peeking at it with this sneaky little grin on her face. Jake's eyes got big, but he didn't say a word. He just stood there, hiding behind his curtain, watching her every move. Karen pulled out a tiny notebook from her pocket, the kind you used to write secrets. She scribbled something fast, her pen moving quick across the page, then snapped it shut and tiptoed away. Jake tilted his head. "What's she doing?" he whispered to himself. He didn't run out or yell. No, he stayed cool like always and kept it in his brain to think about later. The next morning, Jake went to his garage to ride his bike. He kicked the tires like he always did, just to check them, and oh, they were flat, all of them. The air was gone, and his shiny motorcycle just sat there, sad and still. Jake scratched his head. "Huh," he said, "that's weird." He thought about Karen sneaking around the night before. Did she do this? Maybe she poked holes in his tires while he was sleeping. Or maybe it was just bad luck. Could be a coincidence, right? But Jake wasn't dumb. He didn't believe in coincidences, not with Karen acting so sneaky. That little spark of curiosity in him, it was growing into a big, bright flame now. From that day on, Jake decided to keep an eye on her. Not in a loud way like Karen did with her shouting, in a quiet way, a smart way. He'd ride his bike slower past her house or sit on his porch pretending to read, but really he was watching. And boy, did he see some strange things. Karen's house wasn't the quiet, perfect place it used to be. It was busy, super busy, and not in a normal way. First, there were the delivery trucks. big ones with loud engines and rusty sides rolling up to Karen's house at the weirdest times. Sometimes they'd come super early when the sun was barely up and everyone else was still snoring. Other times they'd show up late at night when the street was dark and quiet. Jake would hear the rumble and peek out his window. He'd see guys in hats jump out, carrying boxes or bags, and disappear into Karen's garage. Then the truck would zoom off fast, like it didn't want to be seen. What was in those boxes? Why so secret? Jake didn't know, but it made him wonder. Then there were the workers. Jake started noticing people in Karen's backyard, guys with shovels or paint cans moving around like they were busy. Karen would storm out her back door yelling at them loud enough for Jake to hear across the street. "Hurry up," she'd snap. "Don't mess this up." The workers would nod and keep going, but they didn't look happy. Then bam, she'd slam the door shut so hard the windows shook. Jake tilted his head. What's she making them do? He thought. It was like she was the boss of some secret project, and she didn't want anyone to know. But the weirdest thing, one night Jake saw something that made his jaw drop. He was up late, eating a snack by his window when he spotted a guy in a black hoodie. The guy crept out of Karen's side gate, moving fast and quiet like he didn't want to be caught. He was carrying a big heavy bag, super lumpy like it was stuffed full. Jake leaned closer to the glass. The guy looked around, pulled his hood down low and ran off into the dark. Jake blinked. "Who was that?" he said out loud. "And what's in that bag?" His heart beat a little faster. This wasn't just trash or paint cans anymore. This was big. Every weird moment piled up in Jake's head, like a stack of blocks getting taller and taller. The flat tires, the sneaky grin, the trucks, the workers, the guy in the hoodie. What was Karen hiding? Was she just mad about his bike, or was something else going on? Jake didn't have answers yet, but he was hooked. That curiosity inside him, it wasn't little anymore. It was huge, pushing him to figure her out. He wasn't scared of her yelling or her notes. Nope, he was determined. He wanted the truth, and he wasn't gonna stop until he got it. Karen, though, she had no idea Jake was watching. She thought she was the smart one, the one in control. She'd smirk when she saw him fixing his tires, like she'd won a little battle. She'd march around with her rulebook, thinking she could scare him into being quiet. But Jake wasn't scared. He was quiet on the outside, sure, but inside, his brain was buzzing. Every time he saw something strange, it was like a bell ringing in his head, ding ding ding, telling him to keep looking. So things were getting tense in Pinewood Estates. Karen was getting sneakier, bolder, madder. Jake was getting sharper, quieter, more curious. Two people living across the street, playing a game they didn't even know they were in yet. Karen thought she was the hunter, chasing Jake down with her rules. But Jake, he was starting to feel like the hunter too, watching, waiting, piecing it all together. What was she up to? Why all the secrets? And how long could she keep it hidden? The days kept ticking by, and everyone brought Jake closer to something big. He didn't know what it was yet, but he could feel it, like a storm coming over the hill. Karen's perfect little world was cracking, and Jake's sharp eyes were catching every little break. Something was about to happen, something wild, and when it did, oh man, it was gonna be good. Then came the day everything changed, the day Karen went too far. It was a bright afternoon in Pinewood Estates, the sun shining high in the sky. Jake was out in his driveway working on his motorcycle. He had a wrench in his hand, tightening bolts and making the engine hum. That bike sounded awesome, loud and strong, purring like a big happy cat. Vroom vroom, it went, filling the air with its deep rumble. Jake loved that sound. It made him smile big as he wiped grease off his hands and gave the engine a little rev just for fun. But that sound, oh, it set Karen off like a rocket. She'd been waiting for a chance to lose it, and this was it. Out she came, bursting from her house like a volcano exploding. Her face was red, bright red, like a tomato, and her eyes were wide with fury. She stomped across the street, her arms swinging hard, her loud shoes slapping the pavement. "That's it!" she screamed, her voice so high and sharp it could wake up the whole neighborhood. "I've had enough of you and that noisy junk." She stopped right in front of Jake, pointing a finger at him like it was a sword. "I'm calling 911. You're done, you little punk, done." Jake didn't even look up at first. He just kept tinkering with his bike, turning a bolt nice and slow. Karen pulled her phone out of her pocket, waving it around like it was some big weapon. "I'm doing it," she yelled. "I'm calling the cops right now." She punched the numbers in 9-1-1 and held the phone to her ear, glaring at Jake the whole time. He finally glanced at her just for a second and smirked. That little half-smile made her even madder. "You think this is funny?" "Oh," she snapped. "Just wait." Jake didn't say a word. He revved the engine again, vroom, and the roar drowned her out. She huffed and turned away, talking fast into the phone. "Yes, hello, there's a kid here making too much noise. You need to come quick." Jake kept working, cool as ever, like nothing was happening. Karen stood there, arms crossed tight, tapping her foot fast on the ground. She looked so proud, so sure she'd won. "They're coming," she said, loud enough for Jake to hear. "The cops are gonna shut you down." Her lips curled into a smug little grin like she'd just scored the winning point in a game. She thought this was it, the end of Jake and his loud bike. She'd been dreaming of this moment for weeks, maybe months. No more noise, no more trouble. Just her perfect, quiet neighborhood, back the way she liked it. Minutes ticked by, maybe 5, maybe 10, and then it happened. Sirens, loud wailing sirens cut through the air. Woo woo woo, they went, getting closer and closer. 2 cop cars rolled up the street, their red and blue lights flashing bright. They pulled right into Jake's driveway, tires crunching on the gravel. Karen's grin got bigger. She uncrossed her arms and stuck her chin out, looking prouder than ever. "See," she crowed, her voice all smug and happy. I told you I'd get you." She pointed at Jake again, bouncing a little on her toes. "You're in trouble now, kid." Jake set his wrench down and stood up, brushing dirt off his hands. He didn't look worried, not one bit. The cop cars stopped and 4 officers climbed out, big guys in dark uniforms with shiny badges on their chests. Karen nodded at them like she was their boss. "That's him," she said, jabbing her finger at Jake. "He's the one with the loud bike. Get him." She stepped back, ready to watch her big win unfold. She was so sure this was her moment. So sure the cops would grab Jake, take his bike, and make everything quiet again. But then, whoa, something crazy happened. The cops didn't even look at Jake, not really. They walked right past him, their boots thumping on the ground, and headed straight for Karen's front door. Her smug grin froze. Her eyes got huge, like 2 big round moons. "Wait, what?" she sputtered, her voice cracking. She spun around, watching the officers march up her steps. No, 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 you've got it wrong," she yelled. "He's over there, the kid with the bike." She waved her arms, pointing at Jake like crazy, but the cops didn't turn back. They knocked on her door, bang, 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 loud and firm. Karen's jaw dropped so far it almost hit the ground. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her hands flapped in the air and she started babbling. "This is a mistake. You're supposed to arrest him, not me." But the cops ignored her. One of them, an officer with a deep voice, turned around and looked at Jake. "You're Riley, right?" he asked. Jake nodded, calm as could be. "Yup," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out something small and shiny, a badge, a police badge. He held it up, letting it catch the sunlight. "Undercover for the precinct," he said, his voice steady and strong. Karen blinked, then blinked again. "What?" she squeaked. Her whole face went pale, like someone had dumped a bucket of white paint on it. Jake wasn't just some noisy kid. He was a cop, a real, actual cop, working secretly for months, and he'd been watching her. That's right, Karen, the HOA queen, was the one in trouble, not Jake. Her smug grin was gone, wiped away like chalk in the rain. The truth hit her hard, like a big, heavy brick smacking her right in the head. The officer nodded at Jake, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, we need to talk to you," he said, all serious. Jake stepped forward, his eyes locked on her. "You've been dumping illegal paint and trash all over town," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Those paint cans in your bins, the rags, the broken shovel, we've got proof. Pictures, videos, witnesses. You've been caught, Karen. Game over." Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air. "No," she shouted, "that's not true. I didn't do anything." But her voice was shaky now, not loud and proud like before. The cops didn't listen. They stepped closer to her, and one pulled out a pair of shiny handcuffs. Karen's eyes went wide again. "You can't do this," she yelled. "I'm the good one here. He's the troublemaker." She pointed at Jake one last time, but it didn't matter. The truth was out, and it was big. Jake just stood there, his badge in his hand, watching it all. He'd been pretending to be a noisy kid, riding his bike loud and proud, all so he could keep an eye on Karen. Every vroom, every ride, every smirk, it was part of his plan. She thought she was smarter, but Jake, he'd been smarter all along. The cops were here for her, not him, and that twist flipped everything upside down. The cops didn't waste any time. Right there in Karen's perfect little yard with its neat flowers and trimmed grass, they grabbed her wrists and snapped on a pair of shiny handcuffs. Click, click went the metal, locking tight around her hands. Karen's eyes got huge and her face turned all white, like she couldn't believe what was happening. The neighbors, oh, they were watching. Heads popped up in windows all down the street. Old Mr. Thompson with his glasses, Mrs. Lee with her little dog, even the kids next door pressing their noses to the glass. Their eyes were wide too, because this was big, really big. Karen tried to wiggle free, tugging her arms, but the cops held on tight. "Let me go," she shouted, her voice loud but shaky. "This is a mistake." One officer, a tall guy with a stern face, shook his head. "No mistake, ma'am," he said. "We've got you on everything." Karen's perfect little world, the one she'd bossed around with her HOA rules, was falling apart right in front of everyone. And Jake? He just stood there in his driveway, leaning against his motorcycle, watching it all with that cool, calm look he always had. Here, what came out, Karen had been running a sneaky, shady business. Turns out, she wasn't just the HOA queen who loved rules, she was a trickster too. She'd been telling people she'd clean up their yards or fix their houses. "I'll make it perfect," she'd say, all sweet and smiley. But then she'd charge them tons of money, way too much, and promise to get rid of their junk. Sounds nice, right? Except she didn't do it the right way. Nope. Instead of taking the trash to the dump like she was supposed to, she'd sneak around and dump it illegally. Old paint cans, broken stuff, piles of garbage, all over town where no one would see. She thought she was so smart, saving money by breaking the law, but she wasn't smart enough. Jake had known something was up from the very start. Day one. That's right, when he moved into Pinewood Estates with his loud motorcycle, he wasn't just some kid making noise. He was a cop working undercover, and Karen was his target. All those times he rode his bike, making it roar with that big vroom vroom sound, it wasn't just for fun. Sure, he loved it, who wouldn't, but it was also his trick. He'd zoom around the neighborhood, pretending to be a troublemaker, while really, he was watching her every move. That loud engine Karen hated so much, it was the perfect cover. She was too busy glaring at him to notice he was keeping an eye on her. See, Jake had seen all the clues. The paint cans in her trash bins, he'd snapped pictures of them with his phone. The delivery trucks coming at weird hours, he'd written down when they showed up and what they looked like. That guy in the black hoodie with the heavy bag, Jake had followed him one night, just a little ways, and saw him dump stuff in the woods. Every ride on his bike was a chance to check on Karen to see what she was hiding. And bit by bit, he'd built a big pile